So with the next banned and restricted announcement just over a week away, I figured I'd take my shot at predicting some of the cards that'll probably be banned, because as much as I don't think it really needs it that much, we're going to get a ban list regardless. So first let's talk about the hero that's been basically topping the metagame and that everyone's been thinking about is Gravy. I've already made my opinions on this very clear. I don't think Gravy needs any bans, but it's very likely that he's going to get them regardless. The first card I think is going to be banned is Golden Tipple. This one's a little bit more of a reach, but it's a little bit 50-50. The card's really strong and basically makes the deck work and helps out a lot of other pirate heroes like Marlin, but there's no doubt that it is strong. It generates gold, it draws a card, it filters out allies, puts them in the graveyard, and it lets you activate the hook for free, which is really, really strong. So there's a couple things I could see happening. One is them banning 3 to 6 tipples. I could see them banning maybe just like the reds and keeping the yellows and blues, or just keeping the blues or something like that, because that would hit the deck without getting rid of its main engine, and the fact that every deck runs 9 kind of shows how strong it is. But another thing I could see is actually an errata, which is something I haven't seen discussed that much. Golden Tipple's pretty strong, but the strongest part about it is the draw effect. Basically, if you pitch 1, attack with it, discard a yellow card, make a golden draw card, you're basically just getting however many extra resources you used to pitch, which is typically a blue, so it basically turns into +2 resources. I think if you took out the draw card part, it could be pretty balanced. Like, you attack with Tipple, you have discard an ally, and then you actually have to break the gold to draw a card to get the value. So it can turn it can basically turn 2 cards into 1 with an ally in the grave and a gold, which is not that bad of a trade-off. I mean, it's a little bit clunky and would kind of knock Gravy down a few pegs, but I can definitely see it happening. Maybe it's too far, maybe just banning a couple would be easier, but I don't know, we'll see. I personally would prefer seeing the errata route. I think that would be pretty interesting to see and would take Gravy just down enough to still be a strong meta threat, but not too far down to like be dominating the meta basically. The next card that I think is likely going to be hit is Saltwater Swell. It's basically a Belittle Minnowism rebranded, which is insane for the deck given how that was banned and how it turned Fi into a speed demon for a little while and how it was just basically always resource positive. Saltwater Swell is a little bit more gambly because you have to have a blue card on top of your deck, but the fact that Gravy runs mostly blue cards kind of removes that gamble. It's kind of like running Ravenous Rabble in a red line deck. It's going to be a 0 for 4 9 times out of 10. And even then with the Compass, you can just look at the top card of your deck and only play it when you know you're getting a blue. So it's like, it's not even really a gamble at that point. I can definitely see them just outright banning this card. I think it would quite significantly hit the decks. It would basically make it harder to get extra value or free value off the gold, because typically with 5 floating, you're basically getting 2 extra cards, which is kind of busted. Like, absolutely insane. And with it being blue, it turns on Gravy's ability. It just does so much for the deck and is too much as a whole. The next hero that I absolutely think is going to get hit is Arakni slip through the cracks. Now, he has been the next dominant hero besides Gravy. Assassins are in such a good position right now and have been for a while. Even with new hitting Living Legend, they're still the strongest, most formidable, scary decks out there. But there's 2 cards that I think could be banned, one that's realistic and one that's a little bit more out there. The one that's realistic is Take Up the Mantle. There's been a lot of discussions, but honestly, I think cards like Bonds of Agony and Persuasive Prognosis are totally fair. You need 3 attack reactions, and typically that's going to involve having multiple cards in your hands or playing certain equipment, which is definitely a gamble and a risk you have to take, and even then, if you're playing against a deck that's aggressive that can put on consistent pressure, you're probably only going to activate 1, maybe 2 bonds a turn, and that maybe is really putting a lot of heavy work in. Even with new, like, you could only activate bonds so much, and even then you couldn't use it for other, you couldn't use like your arms or your legs for other reactions in the deck, so it was a gamble and a payoff. I think bonds and persuasive are fine, but I think Take Up the Mantle is just too overpowered. It's very hard to play around, and having to have the downside of your opponent being marked is basically nothing. You know, you can attack with at least 1 dagger a turn to mark your opponent for nothing. You can flick the daggers with flick knives to just mark them whenever you want. So it's not really any kind of downside. And the card just being in your graveyard is like nothing. Like, you're likely not going to get something like Bonds or Persuasive with Codex anyway. So being banished isn't that much of a cost. It's basically just all plus, and it's very hard for your opponent to play around. But that's where I want to talk about another potential banning, which I think is a little bit more unrealistic. But I have a little bit of like gas behind this theory, and that's Flick Knives. Now, Flick Knives was released in Outsiders, and this was like before there was this big book burning and the big shift in how they design cards. And I think that they have been going a little bit crazy with Flick Knives. We've seen decks like Ira with Mask Momentum being able to like retrieve a bunch of cards and just bring them back constantly while also keeping Mask Momentum chains open. We see like Syndra, who can just like abuse the shit out of Mask Momentum because of Flick Knives. And now we see Take Up the Mantle being incredibly broken and busted and overwhelming just based on Flick Knives, because it's always going to be threatening. I think Flick Knives opens up too many possibilities and too many consistent threats throughout the game that is very annoying and overwhelming to deal with, and that's why I think it could be banned. Now, you might be thinking this is insane, this is too much, it's going to cripple so many decks. Ira received an Armory deck where she got a lot of sword support, so I can see Ira decks working just without the Flick Knives. And even Assassins, while Flick Knives is good in their strategy, it's not fundamental to their strategy. They could work without Flick Knives. Would it be good? Honestly, I don't even know how much their strategy would be hit. Like, Arakni would still run the Mark Daggers. You just actually have to attack with them. A lot of the retrieve stuff wouldn't be as great, but oh well, maybe they're going to have some other support, because there's Armory deck Arakni coming out. Maybe they're going to give an arm piece that can work with daggers. Like, that's not Flick Knives, that's not as bad, maybe that's a little bit harder to use, something like that. So, I mean, I could see it hitting a lot of decks, but a lot of the decks that I could see hitting can make up for it in other ways. The only deck that I could see really being, like, capital C crippled by it is Syndra. Like, Syndra lives and dies by Flick Knives, and for her to lose that, she would need, like, a lot of, you know, help to come back from that, something big to, like, really push her back to that dominant status. But honestly, that would be a trade-off I'd be willing to make. If it crippled Syndra but made Arakni more fair, and, you know, made Ira have to focus on using the Okana Scar Wraps and, you know, the Edge of Autumn, that's a trade-off I'd be fine with. But I do understand it is a legendary, and LSS does not like banning legendaries or even Majestics, so I don't realistically see it happening, but I personally wouldn't mind it. Again, I don't even know what they have down the pipeline. Maybe they have something that's going to perfectly replace it, and I'm, like, perfectly predicting this. You know me, never been wrong about a prediction like this. But let's talk about the third deck that was still highly represented. Not many people are talking about, but still kind of want to touch on, which is Verdance. This is the only ban that I don't really think is going to happen, but I still want to predict something, because Verdance is still a really strong deck, really has a big presence in the meta, and is a force to be reckoned with. And I think that the card that is going to be banned is Felling of the Crown. If they're going to ban anything for Verdance, it's going to be Felling of the Crown. Now, the reason is, Felling is just so consistently good in Verdance, and it's like, it just pushes so much value. You're almost always going to be able to, you know, get that 8 points of value and steal a card from your opponent's hand. And the way you beat Wizard is going fast. You want to go fast, you want to push as much damage as possible, and this is like a hard counter to Wizard's hard counter, right? Like, you beat Verdance by just going faster than her and pushing over her defenses and spitting out so much damage before she can decompose, before she can get online, before she can do anything. That's typically how I, you know, understand beating the Wizard matchup, is you go faster than them and you just kill them before they get to their combo or whatever they need to get to. And having this card that basically just, like, breaks the knee of anybody who's already supposed to be able to beat you is, like, ridiculous. Like, it pushes so much damage in a deck where, against Wizards, you don't want to go too low. You don't have as much of a life barrier as you did with something like Florian when he was dominant. Like, Florian was just going to push, like, 2 Rune Chance, 3 Physical, which you can easily block out and play with in the long game, but you can't really do that with Verdance. Once you hit, like, a certain life threshold, once they get that, you know, combo in their hand, they're just going to explode and kill you. That's just what's going to happen. That's how Wizards win. So, you already have barely any life to play around with, and you have this card that's going to immediately get a bunch of value from you, where your main strategy is to try to go faster than them, because if you go too long, if you go too slow, they're just going to get to their combo anyway. But if you are trying to go faster, this hard counters you and pushes so much damage and takes so much temp away from you. It's absolutely just bonkers, and it helps them get to their endpoint of gaining a bunch of life and just dealing a bunch of arcane. So just, again, I feel like it does too much for the deck. Again, I don't think they're actually going to hit Verdance, but just because she's such a dominant deck, I can see banning something from Verdance being on their radar. Is likely? No, but I can definitely see that discussion being had at, you know, wherever, LSS Industries or whatever the hell. So those are my predictions for the next ban list. What do you guys think? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you think that they should actually ban every single card from Gravy Bones, because he is obviously the top meta threat and absolutely nothing can beat him? He is unbeatable. He is the absolute unbeatable deck. He's Prism 2.0. But thank you very much for watching. Do the like and subscribe kind of thing. Bye.